Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Irwin Mitchell presentation today regarding our clients. It's wonderful to have you all here today. My name is Georgina Naylor, and I'm one of the early careers managers based in our Sheffield office. So we've got various speakers with us here today talking about their journey into law and also the clients within their practice areas. We've had some pre-submitted questions already, so we'll try and get through those at the end of the session as well. And hopefully we should be here till about 1:30. So if we could just move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just a little bit of information about Irwin Mitchell to begin with. Hopefully you know a bit about us already, having done some research, but we are a national firm and we were established in 1912, and we have around 3,000 colleagues based across the UK, across 17 offices, and the 11 highlighted on the screen are where we take these, and we have around 100 trainees on programme at any one time. We usually take about 50 in each cohort. With regards to our colleagues, we're proud to support them, and we've been ranked in the top 20 places for work in the UK, great places to work. We've also been ranked in the top 20 for best workplaces for women, and also we've been awarded the Great Place to Work for Wellbeing. In terms of our communities, we've raised over 3 million for charitable donations throughout the firm's registered charities, and we continue to support the firm's 3 charities. We've also got a wide range of clients. We guide them of all sizes and in all sectors that you'll hear a bit more about today. And sometimes we need international support, so we also have an international presence of members of First Law International. And they can help us if we've got clients who need that additional support outside of the UK. We're also a super brand and the strongest performing legal brand amongst big business professionals in the UK. And in terms of our clients, we've helped over 1 million clients, and we're rated excellent on Trustpilot. So we're really proud of all the information about Irwin Mitchell and what we've got to offer. We're considered what people call a full service law firm. So that means whatever advice our clients need, we can help. And in fact, we've got 26 different teams within Irwin Mitchell that a client can use us for, and they're placed into 7 different client service areas. So if we just move on to the next slide, I'll talk you through those service areas. So this is where our trainee solicitors sit when you come into the business. And we've recently reviewed how trainees move around these possible 26 different teams that are within those 7 areas that you see on the screen. And to make sure the training contract seats complement each other and therefore create a solicitor with that knowledge across their client area, we are putting trainees into services for individuals, which are the teams, the practice areas you see across the top, and we put them across services for businesses, which are the practice areas that you see across the bottom of the screen there. So when you apply for a training contract at Irwin Mitchell, you'll need to pick which stream you'd like to work in, for individuals or for businesses. And we found that a lot of our trainees over the past few years have been given the option to go in all 7 areas, but they generally have stuck to either individuals or businesses. So you'll undertake 3 seats with Irwin Mitchell, and your final seat is a repeat seat, and that's over 2 years. And then your seats, as I say, will also align to the office that you apply to, and they'll also align to the business demand that we get from our different teams. So if we could move on to the next slide. So we're going to look at some of the teams that we have at Irwin Mitchell, and you're going to hear, as I say, about some of those today and the clients within them. So within legal services for individuals, we have 11 different types of work for individuals. So we've got complex personal injury with the 5 teams listed there. We've got private client with the 3 teams underneath. We've got a family practice area, and we also have court of protection and public law. So today you'll be hearing about our medical negligence team, and that's Sarah, who's in our Sheffield office. From our private client area, you'll be hearing from Stephanie Kerr, who's in our Manchester office in our Wills Trust and Estates Dispute Department. From family, you'll be hearing from Sarah Balfour, she's in our Birmingham office. From Court of Protection, you'll be hearing from Claire Godsill, also in our Birmingham office. And from Public Law, you'll be hearing from Matt Culverhouse in our Manchester office. And then we move on to the area legal services for businesses. So we've got 15 different teams here that can support our clients with any business queries. So we've got commercial advisory and disputes, we've got corporate and finance, and we have property as well. So from commercial advisory and disputes, you'll be hearing from Shazia Shah in our employment team in London. For corporate and finance, you'll be hearing from Curtis Blackman from our Sheffield office about restructuring and insolvency. And within our property area, you'll be hearing from Claire Patricia Riding in our Manchester office, who's in our planning and environmental team. We do find that some of our work crosses over the practice areas, and sometimes it can cross over the streams as well. So we would always say be open-minded to what Irwin Mitchell can offer you, even though you might have an interest in one particular area. It's great to obviously tell us those passions and those interests you have, but also have that open mind as to what else might be out there for you. So we're going to go through each of those areas that I've highlighted, and the fee earners within the business are going to talk you through their journey into law, the type of clients they work with, and some advice as well about working with clients and some of the tasks that they do. So I'm going to pass to our first speaker, and that's Claire Godsill from our Court of Protection team in Birmingham, and then it'll be Matt from our public team in Manchester. Thanks.
Hi, so I'm Claire Godsill. I'm an associate in the Court of Protection team at Irwin Mitchell in Birmingham office. So my background is I went straight from college to university to study law and American studies. I then did a conversion course for straight law and then the legal practice course. And during that time, I was making applications for training contracts and unfortunately didn't get one. So my first job at Irwin Mitchell was an admin assistant 12 years ago. I did that for 6 months. Then I was a paralegal for about 4 years. And then I qualified the Silex route and have been qualified nearly 7 years now and have been in the Court of Protection team at Irwin Mitchell all that time. I'm a big advocate for it. So the type of work that Court of Protection does at Irwin Mitchell is purely property and financial affairs. We don't deal with the health and welfare aspect within the Court of Protection team here. So if our clients lack capacity to manage their property and financial affairs, that's when you would need a deputy in place. So that would be ourselves. And we don't have named individuals as deputies here. We have a trust corporation, which is the deputy, and that's made up of the Court of Protection partners at Irwin Mitchell. So we would manage all aspects of the property and financial affairs for our clients, from benefits to purchasing houses, to putting the care in place that they need, to adapting a property that they have to meet their needs. And our clients, the majority of our clients are referred to us by the medical negligence team or serious injury, largely birth injuries, accidents at work, assaults, and that's where their compensation comes from. Because they lack capacity to manage that compensation, that's where our team comes in, and we have to manage that claim and make sure that the funds last them as long as possible. So the type of tasks that we do is firstly apply to the Court of Protection, evidencing that the client lacks capacity to manage their property and financial affairs. Once we get the order in appointing us as deputy, we then have to look at what funds that we've got, what the client's needs are. Do they need care? Do they need therapies? Do they need a property purchasing, renting? Does it need adapting? If we're employing carers, then we need to get employment contracts in place for them. So type of tasks, as I said, applying to become deputy, we then meet the client once a year annually, preferably at their own home, in their own environment, make them feel more comfortable than coming into our office. We would invest the funds for them, so that's working closely with financial advisors, and we'll take the financial advisor to this annual meeting with us, so that the client gets to see them, speak to them, ask them how their investments are going. So if it's not the client, if it's a minor, it would be the family. Case managers often come to support clients as well. So it's very, there's a wide range of work that we do within the Court of Protection, and we do work with a lot of teams within Irwin Mitchell. So if we've got a client, they lack capacity to manage their finances, but that doesn't mean that they lack capacity to, say, get married or get divorced. So we'd work with the family team. Do they want a prenuptial agreement put in place if they're looking at getting married, or the other end of that is looking at getting divorced? So do they need a divorce lawyer? We also work very closely with medical negligence, as I said, and serious injury, because that's where we get a lot of our work referrals from. We also work with the wills team, so it's part of our duty to ensure that if we're managing those funds for that client, they will need a will when they become 18. So do the intestacy rules apply? If not, do they have capacity to make a will? Because that is separate than managing your property and financial affairs. You can still have capacity to make a will and lack capacity to manage your own finances. So that's a referral to the wills team if that client has capacity, if they choose to instruct Irwin Mitchell, or that's looking at making a statutory will where the court decides and approves a will on behalf of a client who lacks capacity. We also work closely with the public law team. We've worked with the real estate team because clients sometimes have rental properties as well. So we act as for client as the landlord. So sometimes we have tenants that don't pay, or we've got disputes there, and as I've touched on, that we have carers for a lot of our clients. They need employment contracts put in place, so we go to the employment team and look at getting the contracts put in place for them there. And I would say that my top tip for working with clients is to listen to them, be open-minded, listen to their story, because all clients will have a story to tell, and it's important to them that we hear that story, and be compassionate and empathetic with them.
Hi, so it's over to me. I'm Matt Culverhouse. I'm a partner in the Public Law and Human Rights team based in Manchester. In terms of my background, I studied French and psychology originally at the University of Manchester, before I also did the law conversion course, which I did at Manchester Metropolitan, and then straight on to the legal practice course. I then did a year or so working for a high street criminal firm before I managed to get a training contract with a city centre sort of medium-sized firm in Manchester doing similar kind of range of works to Irwin Mitchell. And then I got a job leading the Public Law and Human Rights team, which was just then being set up in Manchester for Irwin Mitchell back in 2008. And so from the first day when I was the Human Rights and Public Law team in Manchester back then, I now lead a team of 9 solicitors and a similar number of paralegals and support team here. And then we're part of a wider public law team that works across the offices we've been hearing about earlier on in this presentation. Our department is effectively 4 departments in one. We are split into 4 special interest groups, one of which is Court of Protection. We also have Health and Social Care Judicial Review Interest Group. We also work in Education and Civil Liberties. The distinction between our Court of Protection work and the work that you've been hearing about just now is that in the Public Law and Human Rights team, we focus more on health and welfare issues. We very often act for clients who lack the mental capacity to make decisions for themselves and who are the subject of disputes about their welfare, whether that's about where they should live, what care they should receive, what medical treatment they should receive, or perhaps what contact they should have with other people. And we also act for the family members of people who are in that situation. We also act for individuals and charities and other organisations in public law judicial review challenges against public bodies, generally in the sphere of health and social care, but we do also do more general and commercial judicial review cases. And in our education work, that's generally acting for parents who are seeking to get appropriate provision for their children in their educational establishments through the relevant tribunal. And our civil liberties work is acting for people who are seeking to sue the police or in relation to inquests arising from deaths in custody or deaths sometimes in mental health institutions. The range of tasks that we undertake is, of course, broad, and similarly to what you've just been hearing, it obviously involves applications to the court, whether that's the Court of Protection or within the many other jurisdictions that we act in. There's a lot of client contact. People in my team are going out to visit clients. Very often our clients simply are not able to come and see us in the office, so we, of course, go out and see them in their homes. Very often that could be in a care establishment. There's a lot of drafting. I think it's fair to say that we are in court more often than a lot of departments, although members of my team are regularly in court, either in person or since the pandemic, increasingly via remote hearings, going there with counsel, obviously accompanying the client and talking them and helping them through the process and sitting behind counsel to take a note. Because of the nature of our work, we work closely with the Court of Protection team. We also often work with the personal injury and medical negligence team, increasingly doing what we call litigation support. So there might be an issue that comes up in a personal injury claim where the defendant is asking questions about what kind of statutory provision the claimant might be entitled to, and whether that should be factored into the damages claim. And then we assist our colleagues in medical negligence and personal injury teams to respond to submissions made of that nature by the defendants. Again, because of the nature of our client base, very often people who lack the mental capacity to make decisions for themselves, that also means that we're often working closely with our colleagues who work in the wills, trusts and estates teams around issues of property and financial affairs. My top tip is on a similar theme to the one we've heard already. I'd say it's all about communication. I think a very large proportion of what we do as lawyers is around communication. It's really, really important to be able to communicate effectively with our clients, to avoid using jargon. I know that sometimes we lawyers can fall into this trap, but hopefully if you learn from day one to avoid that pitfall, that will stand you in good stead later down. So rather than throwing around 3-letter abbreviations of TOBs, POCs, LBAs, try and spell out what you're talking about to the client. Try and put yourself in the client's shoe and ask yourself, would they understand? Would a lay person understand what I'm talking about? And if not, then explain to them, but without being patronizing, obviously talking to them on a level, exactly what it is you're trying to explain to them, but in simple terms. But as I say, at the same time, don't be patronizing, and do try to understand and listen to your client and understand a bit more about them. It can be embarrassing sometimes if you've gone to great lengths to explain some medical detail to the client, and then they turn around and say, well, actually, before my injury, I was a senior nurse, and so I know all of that, and you didn't need to explain it to me. So basically, make sure you're communicating with your client and you're listening to them. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Rowland. I'm a partner in our medical negligence team. I'm based in Sheffield. In terms of my background, I grew up in the Northwest, went to my local comprehensive school, and I then went to study law at Oxford. I moved to London, which I was slightly scared about at the time, to do my training contract. Ended up staying there for about 10 years, had a great time. But then I wanted to move back up north, and I got my role at Owen Mitchell. That was nearly 20 years ago, and I'm still here. So in terms of the types of clients that we have in the medical negligence team, obviously they're all people who've been injured because something has gone wrong in the course of their medical treatment. They're often very vulnerable, and they are generally going through a really difficult time in their lives, and we are there to support them through that. Most of my own clients are children who have significant brain injuries because of something that went wrong when they were born. That the picture of the gorgeous little girl that you can see on your screen is one of our Sheffield clients who I've met. She's not my client, but I've met her at a party. She's amazing. So we build up really strong relationships with our clients. They're complex cases, and they last a number of years. So we get to know the families really well, and that's a really special thing, actually, in that sort of work. So as well as that sort of brain injury case, I have several clients with spinal injuries. We have quite a lot of amputation cases, quite a number of fatal cases, which often relate to delays in diagnosing cancer and that sort of thing. So it's really varied. People tend to build up little pockets of experience for particular types of case, but for trainees, we try to give people exposure to the broadest range of cases that we can. So types of tasks that trainees will do, again, there's a lot of client contact. Trainees take most of our new client calls, and then we go through a risk assessment process. So there's a lot of work on that initial stage of the case. Reviewing medical records to look at the key issues of liability, to look at breach of duty and causation, and then trainees will often instruct medical experts to prepare reports looking at those issues. We often have conferences with counsel and the experts, which are a really interesting way to learn about the case. We serve letters of claim, and most of our cases get into court proceedings. So there's quite a lot of procedural stuff as well. Very few cases go to trial, but a lot of cases settle relatively close to that. So there's settlement meetings. So it's really quite varied. In terms of the teams that we work with, we do an awful lot of work with the Court of Protection team, as you've already heard. So it's a really good joined up approach for clients that we can deal with the litigation, and our Court of Protection colleagues deal with the financial side of things for clients. We have quite a lot of work with the public law team as well, especially things like children's educational needs. And sometimes we work with the family team, because you can imagine that's also often quite a lot going on in people's families. Top tips for working with clients. I would say that the law and the medicine involved in medical negligence cases are both really interesting, but actually at the heart of every case, there's a person whose life has been turned upside down by what's happened to them. And I think always remembering that is probably the main thing. That clients come to us to support them. Every client is different and they will respond differently to things. So it's about building a relationship with that individual client and thinking about how things are going to land with them. For instance, if we get a positive expert report on a case, we think, oh, that's brilliant, because it means that there's a case and there's going to be damages. But actually, most clients don't want to hear that. Most clients would actually rather hear that nothing could have been done to save their husband, for example. So just think about how to message that. That's something that seems positive from a legal point of view. Actually, for that client, what we're saying to them is that something could have been done to save your partner. So it's just thinking about clients as individuals all the time and building that relationship. It's all about the human touch. I think that's it. Thank you. So we're moving on to Stephanie.
Hi, thanks. I'm Stephanie Kerr. I'm a partner in the Will Trust and Estate Dispute team. My route into law was relatively traditional, although it was quite long-winded. I took my time in actually getting qualified. After I went to college, I went on a gap year to Australia, came back, did my law degree in Manchester, and after that I had another gap year. I went working in a business selling kitchen cabinets and eventually got into conveyancing. So it was quite a long-winded route, and conveyancing led to my training contracts, which I did on a part-time basis, working in a law firm as well as doing the LPC and the training contracts at the same time. And despite my conveyancing background, I qualified as a general litigator, and eventually that general litigation turned into a specialism of contentious probate, or will trust and estate disputes as we call it. So the type of clients that we deal with are really varied. It could be charities, it could be high net worth clients, it might be professional executives such as other solicitors who instruct us to deal with a problem, trustees, but in effect it's anybody really who can inherit. So any man or woman on the street, any child, we deal with a wide variety of individuals. The types of tasks that trainees do are pretty much anything that I would do. I would supervise a trainee or give them that task to do. So we do challenges to wills or defending wills. There might be allegations of forgery or fraud. It might be that a homemade will hasn't been executed properly and we have to delve into the background of what happened. We might be looking at interpreting wills or trusts to decide what a term of that document means. So for instance, what does children mean? It could be pretty straightforward, but it could also be quite a complicated answer. What does money mean in a document? Does it mean cash? Does it mean all of somebody's assets? It's quite complicated when somebody's got quite a lot of variety in their estate. And Inheritance Act claims where somebody might have been excluded and they try to bring a claim against an estate for provision. That might be property, that might be money, that might be something else. And as part of that, we work with a wide variety of teams. So we'd work with the lifestyle and estate planning team to look at referrals from them, or we might have a bit of work that we need to do as crossover. The tax team might be involved if a settlement has some sort of tax liability that might be triggered. Property team dealing with any transfers of property that we might receive or give as part of a deal. And the family team as well. So if we do often find that people have inheritance issues, or they might try to hide inheritance issues as part of a divorce. So we do a little bit of crossover there, and working with other colleagues who have experience in dealing with charities as well. So in terms of my top tip for working with clients, quite a few people have already said to avoid using legal jargon and getting to know your client. I'd probably take it one step further and try to get to know your client to the extent where you understand about if they've got any particular vulnerabilities or disabilities that you need to know about. So for instance, I have a client who can't read, so I have to deal with him in a particular way, meeting him in person or dealing with instructions over the telephone. I've had clients previously who've had learning difficulties, so I've had to write to them in a particular way. But I've also had people where, I write to them on a high level, expecting them to understand jargon, and they've rung up and said, Steph, what do you mean by this? You can't necessarily presume that somebody knows what you're actually talking about. Also dealing with things like colour vision deficiency. So if we send documents that have got colouring on, have you ever asked your client whether they're colourblind or whether they've got any other visual impairment? And mainly the issue for me is that people are bereaved that I'm dealing with, whether that might be my client or my opponent. So there's a lot of high emotion and you have to work out how best to deal with people. They might want you to give really concise advice, or they might go the other end and they might want to know every single eventuality. So it's really about getting to know your client at a really, really high level. And that is pretty much it from me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Balfour and I'm a partner in the family law team. I'm anchored to the Birmingham office, but we actually in family work on a national basis. So we support clients the length and breadth of the country, working as a single national team, and we also help lots of international families as well. I joined the firm around about 18 years ago as a trainee solicitor, having done a straight law degree at Birmingham University. So I started as a trainee and worked my way up to partner within the team. So seen lots of changes, lots of growth, but the culture of the firm has stayed true to itself, and it's been a really positive place to work. Hence me staying all this time. The family team is a large one. So for family law, we're probably, in fact, we are the largest national family team in the country. So there are around about 90 of us, which is probably quite a small team with Mitchell wise, but for family law teams, it is a large one. We support a really wide range of clients. So anyone can be a family law client, and unfortunately, so we help our people who have been injured, for example. I think Sarah mentioned that we're often referred clients from our personal injury teams, and Claire mentioned our court protection teams. So vulnerable clients who sadly face relationship difficulties, we help with divorce and the dividing of finances. We can also help business clients, so business owners that we act for in a commercial setting. We also help international individuals and international families. And the practice areas that we cover, again, are very wide ranging. So divorce, separation, the financial implications. We also deal with private law disputes in relation to children. So if a couple who are separating can't decide who the children live with or the time they spend with the other parent. We also deal with adoption, surrogacy, modern families, assisted fertility. So that's a really important emerging area of law. And we also deal with things like prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. So with that wide range of work that we do, there are lots of tasks that our trainees get involved in, and our solicitors get involved in as well. So, for example, on a financial case, so where we're dividing finances between a separating couple, our trainees would help us to collate financial disclosure. So in order to divide assets, you first need to prepare a schedule of what there is. So collate financial disclosure. You would then get involved in valuation of the assets, and that can often be a business, for example, the valuation of a business or a pension. That can be actually quite a difficult process and needs expert guidance and assistance. And once you've valued and collated the assets, you talk about dividing them. So in accordance with legal principles such as sharing and needs, and our trainees get involved in all of that. We also do court-based work, so we will make applications for things like non-molestation orders or other types of injunction if there's been violence or abuse within the home, for example. We do a lot of our own advocacy in work such as that, and our trainees get involved in all of that from the get-go. We also do some non-contentious work, so drafting pre- and post-nuptial agreements. Again, that's an emerging area of work. It's something that we've only really done for the last 10 years as they've grown in popularity and they've been given a legal footing in recent cases as well. But so a really wide range of things and really important, interesting work. We've been, as a national team, we've been in the Court of Appeal, in the Supreme Court, and our real focus is on getting the best solution we can for clients, and we pride ourselves on our cutting edge approach and pushing the boundaries, really. In terms of the teams that we work with, I think a number of people have mentioned family law already, because we work with everyone. So we work with our complex personal injury teams, supporting their clients, also feeding in potentially to their cases if there is a risk of a relationship separating, or in the future, we can work with our personal injury teams to try to protect any damages that they are achieving for their clients. We work again with our corporate and commercial teams, supporting their clients, again, potentially protecting assets. And again, we work with our international teams. So we do some child abduction work. So if a child has been removed from this country or another country. We can assist in that work. We can also help with jurisdictional work where there's a choice between two jurisdictions in terms of where a couple might get divorced, because that can have a very significant impact on the financial and other outcomes. So we work with everybody really, and that's one of the really positive things about Owen Mitchell, is the way that we can co-work cases for the benefit of our clients. And again, the idea of us being a full service law firm, it is really important from that perspective, that holistic approach. In terms of my top tip with working with clients, it's really that. It's about, I think the most important thing is to not feel, if your client asks you a particular question, it's not just doing the minimum and answering the question you've been asked. It's about digging a little bit further as to what a client wants to achieve. What really is the end purpose, the end goal? What do they want? And trying to help them achieve it in a much wider way, not a narrow, blinkered way, but really trying to understand what they want and help them achieve that. So being very solution orientated. I think often solicitors can be criticised for, and some solicitors can be paper pushers in terms of, you write lots of letters, but where is it actually getting you? So it's about focusing on that solution as that being the most important thing for our clients. But I think I'm passing to, is it Shazia, employment?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm a senior associate solicitor in the employment team in the London office. My background is that I lived in the south and did a law degree at City University. I was lucky enough to secure a training contract pretty quickly after that, and I trained with a law firm in London who sponsored me to do the legal practice course at BPP Law School, also in London. And I joined Owen Mitchell as a newly qualified solicitor in the employment team over 10 years ago. In terms of the types of clients that we have, there's a huge variety. I advise employers and also employees, ranging from those in the banking industry, professional services, for example, lawyers or accountants, both the individuals and the actual firms. And my clients come from all sorts of sectors, so education, technology, financial services, medicine, so pretty much from anywhere, really. And as I said, I act for a mixture of individuals, usually high net worth individuals, and companies as well. In terms of the types of tasks that I would do daily, these include dealing with clients, having meetings with them, advising them in writing, for example, emails and letters of advice, and a trainee would be working alongside me at every step of the way. I do a lot of negotiations in the employment setting. For example, if there's a dispute about equal pay or some kind of discrimination, for example, sex, race, religion or disability discrimination. I help resolve these disputes by applying the law and persuading the other party what changes need to be made in the workplace. In addition, I also do litigation. So if we can't reach some kind of settlement or suitable compromise, then I will lodge a claim with ACAS, which is a body that acts as a mediator, and then a claim in the employment tribunal. If I'm acting, for example, for the individual or the employer. If it's the employer, then I'll be defending such claims in the employment tribunal. So trainees would work in our team and get great exposure to a variety of different tasks and a variety of different cases. Some which do end up in a court or employment tribunal hearing, which can be quite exciting when you see all your hard work of years coming to fruition at the end. Some of the cases in the employment tribunal can take a few years to conclude. After a legal claim and the defence has been submitted, a judge sets what we call directions in a case to prepare it for hearing. And typical tasks that trainees would get involved in include drafting a schedule of loss, for example, to look at the value of the claim, agreeing a trial bond of documents or producing witness statements. And then even going to mediation, so a day of mediation where you're trying to solve the dispute and agree compensation. Some of our cases do get reported in the press and media, which can be quite exciting. And I also get involved in business development activities. For example, this afternoon I'm speaking at a seminar for conduct change, which is about bullying in the workplace. And trainees will have an opportunity to do that kind of work as well. So it's quite a broad range of work that they'd get involved in. In terms of the teams that I work with, our work spans other departments as well. So for example, the data protection team, my client might be handling a data subject access request. So we may need input from the data protection team on our letters. The corporate team might get involved if, for example, we've got shares and restricted stock units, etc., that our client needs some advice on. So we turn to them for that support. And the regulatory team might get involved if we need to. For example, I had a client who was a referee in a football team and he was claiming race and sexual orientation discrimination. He was under a safeguarding investigation by the FA, so I got the regulatory team to advise on how he could defend his position in that investigation. So there is quite a bit of a crossover with other teams. My top tip, I guess, I would echo what everyone else has said before me, but I would just add that every client has different needs and a different appetite for a dispute and a certain financial budget. So make sure you understand that at the outset and the parameters of what they're looking for. It's important to build up a good relationship and rapport with your client, as this will allow you to gain their trust. It will make your job easier as well when you're advising them, because if they trust you and you've got a good rapport, then they're more likely to accept the advice they're giving you, even if it's something they might not want to hear, for example. And that's it from me. I'll hand over to Curtis in restructuring insolvency.
Thank you, Shazia. Hi, everyone. I am a solicitor in the restructuring and insolvency team based in Sheffield. A bit about me. I'm originally from Doncaster and I did an undergraduate law degree at Sheffield University. Very much did the traditional route to qualification. So I did the LPC and my training contract straight after uni. I started training at Irwin Mitchell back in 2019, qualified 2 years ago. And on qualification, I did a 6-month secondment at a client insolvency practitioner, Begbies trainer, working from their Sheffield office, before I then returned to Irwin Mitchell in the R&I team. In terms of the types of clients and the types of work that I get involved with, it is a very varied practice area at Irwin Mitchell. So we do a range of bankruptcy work and also corporate insolvency work. So you might have heard of liquidations, receiverships and administrations. It is also very varied in terms of contentious work, i.e. disputes, non-contentious work, usually transactions, and then advisory pieces of work. So my clients are predominantly insolvency practitioners, and we act on their behalf throughout their appointment. So insolvency practitioners are office holders and have various duties, which is usually realising assets for the benefit of creditors. And again, that often incorporates non-contentious work such as asset sales, but also contentious work like pursuing claims against directors and other third parties. Outside of acting for insolvency practitioners, we also act for purchasers on their behalf when they're purchasing assets of insolvent companies. We can act for directors of companies, whether that's assisting with defending claims or in relation to director duty advice when their company might be in financial distress. We do also act for creditors. Often that can be assisting creditors in petitioning against either individuals or companies when they've got an unpaid debt. and also just general advice in relation to the insolvency regime, if they're a creditor that's and the insolvency process is relevant to them. We can also act for banks, which can be a range of different lenders, anything from small lenders to high street banks, and we will usually advise a bank where they are a secured creditor of a business, and that business might be in a period of financial difficulty, and the bank might want to instruct us to review and advise in relation to their security. So that would be relevant to the bank if the business did enter insolvency, because it would affect the priority of their security and any distributions they might receive as a creditor. So it's very varied work, both in terms of the content and the different kinds of clients that we can act for. In terms of the type of tasks, I've picked 3 that I would usually get involved with more often, and which I did actually get involved with as a trainee as well. So with the sale of assets, normally that's what's known as a pre-pack sale, which is usually an administration. And we would assist by drafting sale documents, which is usually a sale and purchase agreement. We would advise the client on the terms that are being entered into, and liaise with other stakeholders to progress that deal to completion. So that's normally banks or company landlords that have a say in how the deal will complete. We also do a lot of appointment of administrators, and that's usually done by directors of a company out of court. So typical tasks within that are drafting the appointment documents, liaising with the directors and the proposed administrators, reviewing the company articles of association, and ensuring that the board resolution to place the company into administration is valid. We would then need to provide notice to relevant stakeholders, which is usually the bank, and we would then file that appointment documentation with the court, and the administrators would then be appointed. And we also run claims on behalf of insolvency practitioners. So this is usually antecedent transaction claims. You might have heard of preferences, transactions at undervalue, and transactions defrauding creditors. So usually this is where a company's made payments to connected parties, so directors or family members, etc. And that might have been done to the detriment of creditors in the period running up to the insolvency. So we will often review and advise on those claims, draft pre-action correspondence, so letters before action, etc. We would also draft and issue court documents if necessary, so claim forms, application notices and witness statements, and we would then run that case up to the point of trial if it did get that far, obviously also engaging in alternative dispute resolution where appropriate. In terms of the teams that I work with, as you've probably gathered, it's very varied. So I get involved with a lot of other teams, often real estate, as most insolvency matters have a property involved in one form or another. Employment, so that could be employee claims in the context of an insolvency, or employees that are being transferred over as part of an insolvent business sale. Commercial, so intellectual property aspects of business sales, data protection advice, can be very varied. And my top tip, I would say, would be commercial awareness and having an understanding of what the context is behind the legal work, so that you can tailor and apply your advice and really focus on adding value for your client. So I always like to think about ultimately what does the client want and need, and how can I help them achieve that in the work that I'm doing. And that's it from me, and I think I'm passing over to Claire in planning.
Hi everyone, I'm Claire Patrica Riding and I'm the Head of Planning and Environmental Law at Owen Mitchell. I think it's fair to say that my route to law was slightly unusual. I was the first person from both sides of my family to even do A-levels, let alone go to university. but I didn't really know what I wanted to be for a really long time. So I actually went and studied engineering geology at university, and it was actually there where all my colleagues, my students, my fellow students were going off to do geology masters and mining. Actually, I thought that I wanted to do something different. And we had a lecturer who gave us some elective work around mining, quarrying, landfills and environmental planning and law. And that's how I got into it. So that's how I sort of started my journey to becoming a solicitor. And it was really through that module that I did with that particular lecturer. I did my dissertation in a planning application for a quarry, and that was very legislative based. There was a lot of legislation and planning policy in there. So then I started on that journey. I did my conversion course at Birmingham University, and I chose Cardiff University to do my legal practice course. At the time, it was only one of 2 universities that had a specific environmental law module, and because I already knew that that's what I wanted to do, I thought that that's where I was. It was better to do that and set my stall out quite early on. But then actually it was quite hard convincing law firms at the time to have somebody, to take somebody on that had a real desire to only specialise in planning and environmental law. It was a fairly niche area of law at the time, but I ended up finding a perfect home in a boutique law firm just outside Chester. And what we did was we specialised in mines, minerals, renewable energy, environmental law, waste management law and planning law. So for me, it was a perfect 2 years. I started there as a paralegal, and then I did my training contract, qualifying with them and staying with them for a number of years before deciding to move on. So that's my background. It's fairly unusual to come from a geology background. There are a few of us in the legal profession, though. So the types of clients and the types of sectors that we work in. So I had a team of 15 specialist lawyers. We act for both businesses and individuals across a range of sectors. The main sector is obviously the development and built environment sector, because we're often advising clients on obtaining planning permission or advising on environmental liability in relation to a real estate transaction. So these can be house builders such as Persimmon, later living and care providers, as well as other developers that are constructing industrial or commercial premises, or even in fact student accommodation. We also act for developers of renewable energy schemes, and throughout my career I've been fortunate to be part of some of the largest onshore wind and ground-mounted solar schemes in England, and currently the planning and environmental team working alongside our commercial and real estate colleagues are advising on one of the largest rooftop mounted solar energy schemes in the country. We're also specialist advisors to the education, manufacturing and waste sectors. So as you can see, it's really wide because, and primarily this is because most things start with how do I do this? And that's either obtaining planning permission or some other environmental permit or consent. So really we are at the start of, if you want to build something, we're there. If you want to do something in terms of an operation, we're usually there as well. So the types of tasks are drafting. This could be drafting advice to clients, documentation in terms of either a contractual provision or planning and highway agreements or environmental agreements, or we could just be drafting thought leadership pieces and articles. We also review contractual arrangements for clients such as real estate and corporate and transactions. So that could be that we are dealing with how you deal with environmental liability of contaminated land in a real estate transaction, right the way through to environmental liability for a corporate acquisition. But we also deal with other parties and we deal with courts, and I think it's something that isn't particularly really known in planning and environmental. People think that it's really quite a desk-based job, but actually we're out and about a lot. We do a lot of site visits, but we also do an awful lot of court work. So this could be, when we say we're dealing with other parties in courts, this could be speaking directly with the courts or liaising and negotiating a settlement with the other side, serving papers, lodging claims in court, or doing the advocacy ourselves if it's in the magistrates court, or sitting behind a barrister when we're lodging claims for clients in both the High Court or the Court of Appeal, and on some occasions the Supreme Court, as the planning and environmental matters that we have on do have a tendency to have a potential to go to the Supreme Court, and you'll often find that there are planning and environmental matters that do end up in the Supreme Court. And we also do work in the Crown Court, so it's a really varied team, and the team undertakes a variety of work. So the teams that we work with at Irwin Mitchell, well, we're part of the real estate team, so that means that we work alongside our residential and commercial property transactional lawyers, as well as property litigators and construction lawyers, and we form quite a large team at Irwin Mitchell. But we also work closely with our corporate, restructuring and insolvency, banking and financing and commercial colleagues, as well as our regulatory colleagues. So from a business perspective, we act for a large proportion of, well, a large sector of clients, but we also work with an awful lot of teams from the business side of Irwin Mitchell. But we also do act for individuals, and when we act for individuals, we do have a crossover with public law and also the Court of Protection teams, which you've heard of earlier on today. So in terms of the sectors, again, because we act for such a wide variety of clients, we also act for a really wide variety of sectors. So we work with colleagues in later living and care, housing, education, consumer, sports, manufacturing, international and financial services, and we are heavily involved in the sectors at Irwin Mitchell and the sector-led approach here at Irwin Mitchell. So we are the top team at Irwin Mitchell. Sorry, everybody else that's on this call, but no, I'll be killed after I leave this call. But for the top tips, we're working with clients is just be flexible. So adapt your approach to each client, and I think everyone has spoken about levels of communication and listening to clients and really figuring out what it is that they need. But it's be flexible in your approach to each individual client, because they will have different needs and requirements. Be clear and concise when you are dealing with clients. So when we're dealing with environmental liability, say, for example, or planning issues, we have an approach that we do need to be able to tell the client everything, because what we don't want is for something to happen later on and the client say, well, you didn't tell me this. So it's a really hard balancing act to be concise, but also to be correct. And I think that we have a tendency to be quite academic in our approach as lawyers. So where we're telling clients all the pieces of legislation or the case law that affects them, but actually a client doesn't need to know that, or it doesn't want to know that. It wants to know what its effect is on them. So for an example, a client may go straight to the end of a report or a letter of advice and seek out the conclusion without actually reading all the parts of the letter where you're going into detail about which regulatory provision will affect them, or what the elements of this particular case that's just been announced has on them. So sometimes it is about just adapting your approach to communication to a client, understanding what it is that they need, and actually understanding what it is that they want from you. So it might be that they actually just want the answer really quickly summarised, but then with a longer report at the end of that. And I think that mirrors a lot of the advice that other people have said on the call. So that's really is my top tip, is to be flexible in your approach and make sure that you are being very clear and concise to a client. So I've been asked a different question as well, is how do we establish clients and win work within the marketplace? For us all, it's all about reputation. So we work hard on providing a really high level of service to a client and a good service to the client, but we all have sort of really great reputations about being experts in our chosen field. So for me, I'm an expert in planning and environmental law, but I also have a reputation in the development sector and other specialist sectors where I understand what those clients need, and I'm able to adapt my level of service and advice to tailor it from a planning and environmental perspective to that particular sector. So that's how we establish our own reputation, and we win work by talking to clients and contacts. So that could be working with accountants or professional other professional advisors, environmental consultants, planning consultants, architects, and working with those specialist consultants to be able to provide advice to clients going forward. And so we win work from a variety of different ways, but that is largely how we win work. But it's also about being ahead of the game. So for us, from planning and environmental, we are at sort of, sorry to use this analogy, but at the coalface of ever-changing legislative frameworks for clients. So what we've seen over the years, where we've had to traverse from dealing with environmental liability to actually really changing clients' perceptions on climate change mitigation and adaptation, how they deal with their carbon emissions, how they deal with biodiversity gain or loss, and how we can structure a strategy around that, how they're looking at their route to net zero, and right the way from that all the way through to how we deal with press reports about sewage in the surface water courses, and I know that that has taken a lot of press, but also how we deal with waste and recycling issues. So it's a really diverse area, and then that leads then into how we speak to clients on an ESG strategy. So obviously from an S&G point of view, you might be looking at diversity and inclusion policies within your workplace and how you deal with some governance structures. But from an E point of view, from an environmental point of view, that has significantly changed over recent years, from again dealing with, you might have an environmental permit for your operation and how you actually just deal with compliance of a regulatory regime, right the way through to now is, right, okay, I'm going to get to net zero by 2030, 40, 50, whatever it is that the client's objective is, and how you work back from that, how they get to net zero and how they deal with their carbon emissions. And say, for example, the client that we're working on with the roof mounted solar scheme, it can be that how they're looking at how they deliver that product without ever having any carbon emissions, but it's actually looking at how they structure their own power network. So looking at how they can deal with powering their manufacturing plant in the most cost effective but also the most environmentally effective way, and how they deal with their carbon emissions by just dealing with or having some renewable energy schemes on site, which then also leads them into how they deal with climate change going forward and how they can adapt and mitigate their operation to have the least amount of impact on the local environment, but also how they can mitigate the effects of climate change going forward of their particular project or product. So when we're talking about ESG as a whole, it's sort of wrapping up these really wide and really big subjects and trying to sort of tailor that to a client's operation and a client's needs, and how we then deal with that in an effective, clear strategy for a client. And I think I'm going to hand back over to Georgina now.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. Thanks, Claire, and thanks to all our speakers. I'm conscious of time, but we really want to go to the trainees as well. So if you can hold on to come to this next session, that would be appreciated, but it is being recorded if you need to see it another time. So we're going to hear from Lara, Niall and Thomas, who are going to talk a bit about their route into law, and then we've got a specific question for them. So for Lara, if I could come to you and ask you, what is the most enjoyable part of working with clients?
Hello, yeah, so I'm Lara and I am a third seat trainee and I'm based down in the Chichester office. Really quick background, my background is really actually not in law at all. I didn't study law at uni and that was a little while ago. I studied international business and then spent some time traveling, spent some time working in different industries. I worked in marketing mainly. And then studied the GDL. I decided to switch during COVID. So did the conversion and then did the LPC and then managed to get a training contract here. So I've had quite a roundabout route to doing law. And then I've done my 3 seats here. And I think that the question I was going to answer was the best thing about kind of working with clients. And for me, I think there's a few things, but I think it's really great to be able to build a relationship with clients. And often you're working with them throughout your seat. So we do 6-month seats here, and often you do work with the same clients throughout that 6 months. So you can really kind of have the opportunity to build a proper relationship with that client, so that you're kind of like the first person that they come to for certain things. And I think that kind of is something you can kind of, it can really help the team internally if you can show that you're, able to speak to clients confidently and build those relationships, because it's something that you can help the team out with. Where people are really, really busy, you can be the person that provides them with updates and things like that. Yeah, you might not be the sort of specialist in that area of law yet, but you can still really add value to the team there. And I think that's a real opportunity for trainees. And it's something that lots of people might have transferable skills from whatever they've done prior to joining the firm or to joining any firm, whether that's in a different career or whether that's sort of just different jobs that you've done over the time that you've been studying. So I think that's something that it's been really rewarding to sort of build those relationships with clients. The other thing that I think has been really enjoyable is sort of just, although you study the academic side of law, obviously, and you sort of do start to apply that, I think it's really interesting when you start working in a firm and you see how different each client is. And although they might be looking at a very similar area of law, their approach might be different, their priorities might be really different. And so, having that contact with clients really shows you the variety of how, even within one sector and within one sort of area that you're working within, everything can be so different just depending on what that client is really looking to achieve. So that's been a really interesting kind of takeaway, and that's been across the different teams I've been in as well, and with lots of different types of clients. So I think those are the main things that, the best thing I would say about working with clients. So yeah.
Brilliant, thanks Lara. Next we're going to move on to Niall. And Niall, my question for you would be, how has knowledge from one seat helped you with the other seats that you've been placed into?
Yes, thank you, George. Hello, everyone. Just similar to Lara in terms of a brief background into me. So I've always done law. So I did the 3-year law degree at university. I went to University of Southampton. Then I did a history master's for a year because it's kind of during COVID times and things were online. I didn't really know what I was going to do. And then I decided during that to then do the LPC and then straight into being a trainee as well. So I kind of did uni, came fresh out of uni, and then into the law firm. As it says on the screen, my seats were workplace injury, serious injury, and medical negligence. So in terms of how the kind of seats communicate with each other, they're all personal injury based. So it's good in a way that I've done my seats this way because they all use the same case management system. So in terms of my first seat, kind of getting into the swing of things more from, as I said, I came straight from university, so I was a bit like, I don't really know, how things kind of work and how we operate. But learning that in, like, say, the first week of that seat, and then set me up for the rest of my training contract in terms of, how we draft letters and how we communicate with clients and the whole kind of file of a case. And then I'd say more so into seat 2 was when I kind of found the most crossover into my third seat. So from serious injury, I also did a lot of military work, so with the Ministry of Defence as the defendant, and a lot of the way that you kind of handle the clients in my second seat of serious injury is similar in the way to medical negligence in terms of the procedures that you do, although they kind of run their cases slightly differently. Serious injury and medical negligence, the way that you kind of communicate with a client, but also you draft witness statements, letter of claim or letter of notification, you instruct experts to report on each case as well. So by doing my training contract in all PI focused disciplines and seats means that when now that I'm in my third seat, I've kind of worked in 3 separate areas, but all kind of with similar goals and similar procedures within the same way that inevitably kind of helps in dealing with clients and providing the best service to clients, because I've kind of, as I said, trained in different seats but the same areas that combine to providing the service that Owen Mitchell does. And yes, that was everything from me, George.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Niall. We're now going to pass it over to Thomas, who you can see which teams he's been in from our London office. And my question to Thomas would be, how have clients crossed over between the departments that you've been working in?
Hi, thanks, George. So hi, yeah, I'm Tom. I'm part of the London cohort, and as you can see, my seat's there. So similar to Niall, I took a traditional route. So I went down, I did international law actually. So I did a 4-year course with a year abroad in the third. So in terms of how clients are crossed over from seat to seat, I think it's important to start off talking about the firm's initiative in providing a full client service. So I noticed whilst transitioning across seats a strong overlap of clients and client work. And basically the firm has a referral scheme where we're constantly reviewing existing client needs and referring to other areas of the business to provide, a complete holistic service. And then if the referral is successful, then award is given to the referring fee earner. So the firm has a big emphasis on collaborating and sharing work where needed, sometimes working together, sometimes just referring for a separate client need. And in terms of how I personally witnessed that, between my last seat, for example, IP, and my current seat now, corporate, there was a strong interconnection between the work that we do. So the teams would work closely together on certain projects after, for example, an M&A transaction. So after a transaction is completed and a target company has been acquired, there will be certain logistical elements post-completion, which we can then refer to respective teams. So commercial, for example, we can refer to specific supply contracts. With IP specifically, there'll be a whole load new of IP portfolio brand protection needs. So watch notices and whatnot, and essentially what that does is it keeps a stream of income from the client to the firm after a deal is finalized, rather than just completing a deal and then kind of seizing your business with the client. Another obvious example of overlap between all 3 of my seats, actually, with my first one being employment, is due diligence in a big transaction. So due diligence is essentially where the verification and investigation stage of a transaction, just to confirm facts within a certain deal, are true, just so a company that's acquiring another company knows essentially what they're getting into and what they're signing up for. So essentially on the business stream, it's all hands on deck for this kind of stage of the transaction. So with employment, for example, the due diligence stage would work closely with the corporate team in reviewing employment contracts, settlement agreements for employees that aren't necessarily transferring over, any grievance or disciplinary issues, pay disputes, warranties and whatnot, in anything employment related and so forth. And then corporate would have that oversight. So we would work closely and collaborate on that sense. Similarly with IP, corporate work closely with the IP team in reviewing the IP assets of a target company or business. So trademarks, design marks, patents are reviewed, any outstanding disputes, any foreseeable issues, so any potential disputes for marks or prior rights, for example. Essentially, you can get a kind of whole view of the company you're acquiring. And in terms of the corporate team's role, they would generally oversee the entire process of this, and you'd work within specific fee earners within the different teams to kind of collate all the data for what would be called the due diligence report. So I've only actually worked on one due diligence transaction, and I think within that single transaction, I learned quite a lot about the different roles of the different teams, and essentially the importance of collaboration between them. So there's certain teams where I wouldn't necessarily have been exposed to if I don't do a seat in it, but then you get to understand the functions of what they do and their role in a transaction, for example. So in summary, within a business law context, there's constant opportunities for further referrals to different branches of the firm. And whilst I don't have specific figures to hand, I think it showcases a large percentage of the firm's work play a role and in the profitability. So with internal referrals, it brings down the marketing costs and time spent on external business development. And I think from a trainee's perspective, I found it quite insightful to witness how all the different teams work closely in the success of a transaction, and the different services you can provide to a client, whilst learning the roles of many different branches of the BLS division of the firm. So yeah, that's everything from me, George.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks to all our trainees and all our speakers for today. And again, apologies, we've run over time, but hopefully you've felt it was a good reason to go over time to hear from everybody and all of our speakers today. Hopefully you've got a better understanding as well about all our different teams and the different clients we have. And you can see that we have lots of different clients within Irwin Mitchell due to that full service nature of the firm. I think what's at the heart of all our clients is finding out what they want, what they actually want to get to, what they need, and putting them first in everything that we do, be that in personal injury, in sort of private client work, or even in the corporate work and the commercial work that we cover as well. I'm afraid we haven't got time to go to any other questions, but we do have some further events coming up over the next few weeks. There's one next week with regards to our culture. The following week, a Q&A with the early careers team. And on Tuesday, the 5th, there is a session with the trainees as well. If you would like to find out more, then you can see on the slide there the link to our website. And our applications are now open until the 2nd of January. But thank you very much for joining us. And we hope to see your application coming through soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye.